Hear, hear. Hear, hear. Hear, hear. Parkinson's Podcast. Welcome to the Hear, Hear Parkinson's Podcast, where you will hear from special guests covering the world of Parkinson's with a deep dive on the World Parkinson Congress and a look at how the WPC has helped make extraordinary progress in the Parkinson's community by creating space for people with Parkinson's to have a seat at the table.
Hear, 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 hear. It's another episode of the Hear, Hear podcast, leading us all in the direction of Phoenix, Arizona, May 2026. I'm Edgar Waldmanis, one of 16 global ambassadors for the Congress, doing my best to drive all of you in the direction of Phoenix a year from, well, a bit more than a year from now. As very often before, I have my trusted co-pilot with me, Ms. Eli Pollard from the World Parkinson Coalition. Hello, Eli.
Hi, Edgar. Very excited to be here today with our special guest. Looking forward to this conversation. Thanks for running the show.
Yes. Today's guest is one of 4 co-authors of the book Ending Parkinson's Disease. Well, we didn't succeed quite yet, but doing our best. And it simply is the one and only Dr. Ray Dorsey. Welcome, Ray.
Thank you very much for having me, Edgar. Thank you very much, Eli. Thank you very much for all that you do for the Parkinson's community around the world. It's people like you who will change the course of this disease. So thank you.
That's very kind of you. I have to say before Edgar even goes on, Ray, I have to say that when Edgar was interviewing to be one of the ambassadors for the WPC, I did ask him about his own WPC experience. And he said one of his favorite experiences was meeting the amazing stars in the book nook, the authors of the Ending Parkinson's book. So you're literally, making Edgar's day by joining the podcast here. He said it was such an exciting thing to have an opportunity to meet you guys, but then also to see you throughout the Congress, wandering the halls and in meetings and accessible to people, which is one of Edgar's favorite things about the Congress, that he always talks about the accessibility of the community to each other during those 4 days. But sorry, Edgar, I just had to share that. So Ray knew you were like literally part of your interview. Ray came up.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And yes, everything that Eli said is totally correct. Because I saw in the program for Barcelona, it suddenly said the book nook around lunchtime, and the co-authors from the Ending Parkinson's Disease book will be there. And I thought, that's not possible. They're going to be run down by others. They are going to want to speak with totally different people, but there you were, totally accessible. Yourself, Michael Oken, and Bas Bloom, all in one place. And we had some good talks then, and then a few weeks later, you joined my Norwegian podcast for an interview, each of you. So yeah, that was one of my main takeaways actually from Barcelona. But then yeah.
I sorry to interrupt. It's not accidental that people like Bas and Michael and I try to be as accessible as possible, because if we're going to end the disease, it's not going to be because the neurologists end the disease. It's because the Parkinson's community ends the disease. If you think about it, diseases that have ended, polio, driven by a march of dimes beginning in the United States, drinking and driving, driven by mothers whose children were killed or disabled in accidents, HIV, driven by activists in New York and San Francisco and then around the world who changed the course of these diseases. They weren't changed by the neurologists or the infectious disease experts or trauma surgeons. I mean, they played a role, The people who fundamentally change the course of these diseases are those people who are most directly affected by the disease, who know its burden and its, I don't know, terror is too strong a word, most intimately. And so, sometimes we're looking for Superman, and Superman turns out to be like Eli and Edgar and the PD Avengers. These are the people who will change the course of the disease. And people like Boss Michael and I, we just want to empower you as much as possible to do that.
Right. So what was your personal takeaway from Barcelona?
Well, I love going out to the Parkinson's community, but this might sound a little bit odd, but I get pissed off when I see people with Parkinson's disease. Not because I'm pissed at seeing them, but I think the suffering that they're experiencing is needless and it's preventable. Bad things happen to good people, but if we can prevent bad things from happening, we should. Candace Lightner in 1980, her 13-year-old daughter was struck and killed by a drunk driver. And, there was nothing that she could do to bring her daughter back. There was no magic pill. There was no trauma center. There was nothing that she could do to bring her daughter back. But she resolved that this shouldn't happen again to anyone else in her family. It shouldn't happen to other children. It shouldn't happen to other mothers. It shouldn't happen to other parents. It shouldn't happen to other schools. And it shouldn't happen in other communities. So every day for a year, she went to the California governor, then Jerry Brown, and petitioned. Drinking and driving was legal in some states in 1980 when her daughter was killed. 8 years later, drinking and driving is illegal in all 50 states. Drinking age in the United States was raised from 18 to 21. Blood alcohol levels dropped to 0.08. Because of her and people like her, 10,000 fewer people in the United States die from drinking and driving accidents per year. 10,000 per year fewer die because of this. And that's just the United States, right? Drinking and driving is not socially accessible anywhere. It's like one of the few things you don't have to tell your kids not to do. And people like her have changed the course of that condition. And I think it's people like you and Eli who are going to change the course of Parkinson's.
Mm.
I think that was a wonderful signal, and as you say today, you don't have to defend yourself. You had to for many years when you went to a party and you said, "I'm just going to have a soda," or whatever, and then people said, "What?" and then he said, "Yeah, because I'm driving," and they say, "Oh, you can always have one, or you can always have two," and research shows you can actually have three before it's 3 beers or 3 glasses of wine or whatever before, and then you were into an argument. These days, people say, "Oh, all right, here's the soda."
Much more acceptable to not drink these days for all sorts of reasons, health reasons, driving, but people are much more accepting of that. There's a whole industry that's crept up and creating drinks for people who don't want to drink alcohol.
Exactly.
Which is good.
So why don't we make it like socially unacceptable to spray pesticides on kids' schools?
Oh my God, let's do it, Ray. Why can't we make that happen here in the US? I don't know about Norway. It's probably far ahead of us, but it's not just spraying the pesticides by schools. It's the food. It's the chemicals in the processed food we're eating. It's just crazy. Where are we, Ray? What's happening? What's happening with now?
So that's what we Michael and I have, because Edgar said we haven't ended Parkinson's disease yet. So Michael Oken and I said we need a plan, and so we wrote a plan. It's a detailed plan. It's in a book coming out called The Parkinson's Plan. It's coming out in August. You can pre-order your copy now. And it's got very tangible recommendations what you as individuals can do to lower your risk of Parkinson's disease or slow its progression. So there's the first recommendation: washing your produce, even your organic ones, to reduce your individual exposure to pesticides. And then it tells you what we can do as communities, stop using pesticides on our schools. There is no reason that people with Parkinson's can't make their voices heard and say, the schools in my district where my children or grandchildren are going should not be sprayed with pesticides. We know that the likely exposure to these toxins that are leading to Parkinson's are planted at an early age. At an early age, it could be a child. Brian Grant, the NBA basketball player, was exposed to trichloroethylene, the dry cleaning chemical, when he was a 3-year-old boy living at the Marine base Camp Lejeune. Michael J. Fox, says he got exposure to Parkinson's. He likely got Parkinson's from exposure to some kind of toxicant. He was part of a cluster of individuals with Parkinson's disease on a TV show called Leo and Me before, what was his other show? Oh my gosh, I'm getting in trouble here. Not Family Ties. Family Ties, thank you. Sorry. And he was 16 when he was doing it. So these exposures are beginning at childhood or young adulthood. And why can't we get rid of these chemicals in our schools and our sports fields? And then what can we do as a society to get rid of these chemicals? And our book is entirely focused on the stories of individuals affected. Edgar, I don't know, do you know Stein Nelson from Norway?
No.
Dr. Stein Nelson, Norwegian. And evidently he said that Norwegians like to go around the world in peacekeeping missions. And so he was based in southern Lebanon, I think in the 1980s. I could be off on my date. As a soldier. And he was, watching Israeli trucks go into Lebanon. And he had a bunker where he and his 3 fellow soldiers lived, 2 at a time, 2 on duty, 2 sleeping. And his bunker was filled with scorpions and other insects. And they sprayed the bunker with pesticides, including a pesticide that's been linked to Parkinson's disease. So every day he was breathing in pesticides in this bunker. And then a couple decades later, he develops Parkinson's disease. Now, can I prove it was that pesticide that was in his bunker? No. But if you see and hear enough of these stories and you get enough circumstantial evidence and enough laboratory evidence, it gets you to be really, really concerned about why people are developing this disease. So in the Parkinson's plan, we are very, Michael and I think, especially we got tired of being asked, what can I do? So we gave you a plan. It's pdplan.org, pdplan.org. You can pre-order your copy. It comes out in August. But you can do as individuals, as you can do as communities, and what you can do as societies to prevent the disease, to learn why the disease begins, to amplify the voices of those affected, like through the WPC, and to navigate the frontier of new treatments.
But Ray, what's the pushback? I'm just curious. When you talk to people about banning chemicals or why can't we do this, and people who do you ever encounter people who are on the pro pesticide, the pro chemical, like, no, we need these because of X, and what are they saying? Why are they saying we can't ban them?
So I think the main recommendations we put in there are 80% of people. Who would not want? Who wants pesticides being sprayed on their kids' school? Right? That is not a partisan issue. That's I didn't know pesticides were being sprayed on my kid's school. What's the rationale for doing that? And I think we give you very, very, what's wrong with washing your produce? Why are we putting so many chemicals on our food? I think the vast majority of people accept these things. It's just that change happens because of people organize themselves into units and make their voices heard. And so if the benefits to getting rid of pesticides are great, but they're spread over a large population, the benefits to selling pesticides is concentrated among a few individuals. Those individuals make their voices heard. People with Parkinson's have not made their voices heard. People with Parkinson's despite that, I'm not casting aspersions on anyone. WPC helps make people their voices heard, but we're not being heard. Yeah. People with HIV were heard. Mothers Against Drunk Driving was heard. Polio was heard. And once people make their voices heard, change happens. And, Michael J. Fox can't do it by himself. Brian Grant can't do it by himself. Davis Finney can't do it by himself. They need support.
But there is another point here. So even with the rapid growth in electrical cars, still a large population of the cars on the roads are still what we call old-fashioned or historical, by gasoline or diesel for that matter. The same goes for aircraft. When you say to someone, in order to stop Parkinson's disease, you have to drive less by your car. You have to do only half the trips next year that you're usually done in a year. And then what people say is, yeah, but it doesn't matter. It won't have an impact if I stop driving, or if I don't go on a holiday abroad. That doesn't matter because the aircraft is flying anyhow. So whether it's flying with 98 passengers on board or a full 100, I don't make a difference. Then what do we do?
Yeah, so there are definitely things you can do individuals. You can, wash your produce and buy organic, right? Those are things you as an individual can do. But some of these things are societal. And air quality, we as a society have adopted stricter regulations on air emissions from cars and from planes. And because of that, air quality in the United States and in Europe is 50 to 90% better than it was in the 1970s. In the 1960s, the governor of California said we should eliminate all unnecessary driving. The governor of California said in the 1960s we should eliminate all unnecessary driving. That governor was Ronald Reagan. In the 1970s, another Californian, intimately familiar with air quality in Southern California, which was so bad people wore masks not because of COVID-19, they wore masks because of air pollution, created the Environmental Protection Agency. That president was Richard Nixon. Listen, if people make their voices heard, Richard Nixon's responding to Rachel Carson in 1962 writing Silent Spring. If people make their voices heard, politicians of all stripes will adopt policies that will clean up our environment. And those are just Republicans who adopted policies to do it. So I think this is all there, but we need to make our voices heard and we need to make clear why. I mean, I think, why should we not drink and drive? Well, because we shouldn't kill kids. Why should we raise money for polio? So our kids don't get paralyzed. Mm-hmm. Why should we invest in HIV? Well, so that our brothers and sisters don't get HIV. And I think we need to say, well, why should we stop spraying pesticides? Because we don't want to spend our 50s, 60s, and 70s with Parkinson's disease, nor, quite frankly, do we want to spend our 50s, 60s, and 70s caring for someone with Parkinson's disease.
Good.
Ray, has any places in the world, any regions, any cities, any countries really been doing exceptionally well in this area? Are there any champions where you're like, they've really put in great policy in their country? And then I'm curious because I'd like to follow those places.
Yes. So in about 10 years ago, Robin Sowell dropped off her 5-year-old child at Sherman Oaks Elementary School in Southern California. And she dropped off her kid at the elementary school. He got out of the car, and there's a guy in a hazmat suit spraying pesticides on the elementary school. And he sprays the pesticides. As coincidentally, when the kid is walking out, the kid has an asthma attack in front of his mom in response to being sprayed with pesticides. The little boy goes back to his mom and says, Mommy, is this ever going to happen again? And she says, no. And she says no. And a couple years later, California becomes the first state in the United States that bans the use of toxic pesticides on playgrounds, on schools. And if schools spray pesticides on the school, they must notify parents in writing every year of their plans to do so. So what's happened is that California spends less money spraying spends less money spraying pesticides. Kids are healthier, getting fewer asthma attacks, planting fewer seeds for Parkinson's disease, fewer seeds for cancer, and people are healthier. If they can do that in California, why can't we do that in other states? Mm-hmm. And there, people probably, I talk a lot about
it in other states, Ray. Are we doing it in other states?
Yeah. So other states, not in the U.S. yet, but I'll tell you, I live in Rochester, New York, in suburban Rochester. I gave a talk at a library, at Henrietta Public Library, upper middle class neighborhood, and the town supervisor of Henrietta in Henrietta, New York, population maybe 30,000, said that he hadn't signed a purchase order for pesticides for the entire year to date. This was like midway through the year. And if you think about it, you're the town supervisor, you're using pesticides on the medians, you're using pesticides on the county golf course, you're using pesticides in schools. He's not signing invoices for pesticides. And he doesn't know about the link between pesticides and Parkinson's disease. He just knows that pesticides, neurotoxins aren't generally good for our health. And so these are very things that are eminently achievable, that Edgar, Eli, Ray can all drive change in our communities, in our schools, people on PTAs, and say, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Excellent thought. Excellent. Do you know of other countries outside the US? I mean, this podcast is going out to a wide audience.
So that we detail all this in the book. I'm going to be shamelessly plugging the Parkinson's plan, because the more pre-orders we get, the more attention we get, the sooner we bring about the end of Parkinson's disease. That's just the brutal fact of it, is that we got to sell copies of the book to bring attention to Parkinson's disease. We need to make our voices heard. So in the Netherlands, the Rotterdam study is one of the few studies that have measured the incidence, the number of new cases of Parkinson's disease over time. And they did a study in 1990 and then 2010, and they found that the incidence, the number of new cases of Parkinson's disease adjusted for age, decreased by 60%.
Whoa.
A 60% decrease exactly in 20 years. So now Boss says there's some limitations to the study, so I listened to Boss, but this is what the study found. They weren't able to explain it. I went backwards and said, let's look at the chemicals that I care most about for Parkinson's disease. Certain pesticides, dry cleaning chemicals, including this trichloroethylene, widely used in degreasing and dry cleaning, and air pollution. And it turned out that the levels of DDT and other DDT was banned in the Netherlands. Levels of DDT and its metabolites in people's fat had dropped over 70 to 90% in the decades preceding this decline. Levels of TCE were among the lowest in all of Europe, and air pollution had improved 50 to 90%. So if you see changes in these levels of these chemicals in the decades later, short period of time, 1990 to 2011, 21 years, 60% decreased. Germany, the study came out, incidence of Parkinson's disease adjusted for age, decreasing. And if you look at Western Europe as a whole, the rates of Parkinson's disease adjusted for age are going up much slower than the rest of the world.
Wow.
So if you clean up your environment, Parkinson's disease is going to go away. Going to go away.
So then, seeing as there are new polluters coming onto the scene every day, I remember when
it's a bit of a Sisyphean battle, but Ray's point is right. You just can't stop. We just have to constantly be arming ourselves with the information to fight this. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's not just us, right? If you look at the United States, rates of cancer are increasing among Americans under the age of 50. So you'd say, well, what's that? Can it be genetic? Unlikely, right? Genes don't change in a short period of time. Is it aging? No, this is under 50. Is it screening? Unlikely, because generally speaking, we don't screen for cancers until 50. And are there other environmental factors? Well, smoking is actually going down in the United States, dramatically. So what's fueling the rise of these increasing cancers? Why are women getting breast cancer in their 50s? Why are guys getting colon cancer in their 40s? And I think it's because some of these chemicals are becoming increasingly common. Trichloroethylene causes cancer. And so we need to make partnerships with these other communities, both diseases and environmental groups, to make our voices heard in a bigger way so that we drive change. And if we drive change, we get rid of diseases. Wouldn't it be wonderful to have no more WPCs in 2040? Wouldn't that be a fantastic thing? And unless you think I'm making this stuff up, the March of Dimes no longer does polio work.
Yeah.
The March of Dimes no longer does polio work.
Yeah, I really like to put ourselves out of business. I mean, literally when I took this job in 2006, it was, I took the job in 2004, and that was shortly after Michael J. Fox spoke on Congressional Hill here in the US. And he said something along the lines of, if we just get more money to NIH, the cure is like 5 years away. And I took this job thinking, okay, I'm going to take this job. The cure will be in 5 years. It'll be an amazing place to be in the Parkinson's when the cure is found. And then I can close this organization and go on to something else. So I'm actually not happy that I'm still here 20 years later. I do love the community that I work with, but I would be thrilled to close the door on the WPC.
And I think we're a little bit off on our focus. We're trying to cure disease. Think about what's the first step to curing a disease. The first step to curing a disease is to know its cause.
The root cause, so you can stop that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I can't think of a disease that we can cure medically where we don't know its cause.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And so just like an example, if we know what causes somebody pneumonia, we can give them a pill and get rid of their pneumonia.
Yeah.
Even in my lifetime, hepatitis C used to be called non-A, non-B hepatitis because they didn't know what was causing the inflammation of the liver. Then they figured out it was hepatitis C, and now you can take a pill and get rid of hepatitis C. If you know what polio didn't know, we didn't know what we suspected a virus. We didn't know what the virus was. Once we found out what the virus was, we were able to develop a vaccine to prevent polio. HIV is going to disappear likely as a major clinical entity in our lifetime in the absence of a cure. There's only been 5 people, I think, cured with HIV in the history of the world. 5 people cured with HIV. They got stem cell transplants and made their cells immune to being infected by the virus. But we're going to get rid of HIV because we're just preventing it with a condom. Once we got air purifiers, once we stopped using paraquat, what happens if we changed the chemicals that we use in dry cleaning or just, got rid of dry cleaning altogether? We could get rid of Parkinson's disease. And I think we're undervaluing and underestimating the immense potential that we can have for future generations and even for ourselves in terms of slowing the rate of progression of the disease if we start getting exposed to these chemicals.
What do you think on the side of the teams that are doing research around genetics and the genes that they're finding that they feel that are linked to Parkinson's or maybe linked to Parkinson's? What do you say to that when someone says some people may have a genetic disposition to this or there must be a genetic tie? Well, the majority don't. What is your response to that? I'm just curious.
So let's look at the facts. So PD Generation, kudos to the Parkinson's Foundation, Jim Beck and many others for starting it, Roy Alcalay and others. So PD Generation offers free genetic testing and genetic counseling to individuals. I think it's just in the Americas. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong.
It sounds like the US too, but anyway, yeah, keep going.
And so they've done genetic testing on 10,000 individuals who have Parkinson's who signed up to participate in a study of genetics. And what did they find for the first 10,000? They found that for those individuals, 12.5% had an identifiable genetic risk factor, either genetic cause, LARC2, about 2 to 3%, GBA, a genetic risk factor associated with a 10% lifetime risk of developing the disease. Said another way, 87.5% of individuals with Parkinson's in the United States have no known genetic cause or risk factor for disease.
Right.
87.5% of Americans with Parkinson's have no known genetic cause or risk factor responsible for the disease. Ergo, it's not genetic. And this is the same finding that Carly Tanner did in a twin study. She looked at rates of Parkinson's among identical twins and rates of Parkinson's among fraternal twins, non-identical twins. If something's highly genetic, rates among identical twins should be much higher concordance than non-identical. And she found there was no difference, concluding in 1999 in JAMA that for the majority of individuals, genetics plays a very modest role, and that is due to environmental factors. And so what are those environmental factors? Dr. Tanner, quiet, industrious, not prone to hyperbole, has detailed that certain pesticides, dry cleaning chemicals, and air pollution are the principal causes of Parkinson's disease. If we recognize that, we get rid of it. It's just like if we get rid of smoking, you get rid of lung cancer. You get rid of asbestos, you get rid of mesothelioma. You get rid of lead, which we've done. You get lower lead levels. Lead levels today in children are 95% lower than when I was a child, when you were a child, when Edgar was a child. Our children are smarter because they have less lead. And if we get rid of these chemicals, we just get rid of diseases. Just like these diseases largely didn't exist before these chemicals came. Smoking was so rare in the United States in 1900, it was a once-in-a-lifetime oddity. medical students and doctors would gather around thinking they would never see a case. It didn't exist as a major clinical entity, extraordinarily rare until cigarettes came. You get rid of cigarettes, you're going to get rid of lung cancer. 80 to 90% of lung cancer today is due to smoking.
It would be amazing. I mean, you're absolutely right. It would be incredible if we could figure out a way to support those 87.5% people with, without sort of a known cause to Parkinson's, and just be able to then spend all of our time focusing on the remaining 12.5% to deal with their genetic disposition.
So let's talk about the other 12.5%. So of that 12.5%, only 1% is purely genetic due to mutations in a gene called Parkin. LRRK2, your lifetime risk of developing Parkinson's, if you carry a LRRK2 mutation, the most common genetic cause of Parkinson's, is somewhere between 30 and 40%. It turns out that LRRK2, that mutation, increases the activity of a protein, also called LRRK2. It turns out that this dry cleaning chemical also increases the activity of that exact same protein. So the most common genetic causes of Parkinson's and what I think might be the most common environmental cause of Parkinson's in the US both act in a very similar way. It also might stand to reason that people who have a LRRK2 mutation might be especially susceptible to the effects of different chemicals like trichloroethylene. Similarly, GBA, which is the most common genetic risk factor, about 8 to 10% of that 12.5%. So 2/3 of that 12.5% carry a GBA mutation. Lifetime risk is only 10%. So the vast majority of people with the most common genetic risk factor for the disease will never develop the disease. But Carly Tanner and colleagues, again, have shown that in the Michael J. Fox Foundation's PPMI study, that people who carry GBA mutation might be especially sensitive to the effects of pesticides. So we have really good clues as to that people who carry a genetic risk factor or genetic cause for the disease might be at increased risk for the harmful effects of these environmental toxins. Flip it. If you have these genetic risk factors, you should be especially concerned about avoiding exposure to these environmental toxins. It's much easier to control your environment than to manipulate your genes. And so if you carry one of these genetic risk factors, you should be really concerned about buying organic produce, about washing your organic produce, about avoiding dry cleaning that uses trichloroethylene or perchloroethylene, also called PERC. You should be really concerned about air pollution. These are all the things that you should even have a heightened thing, and as should your children and your grandchildren. And we detail all of that in the Parkinson's plan. We give you 25 specific recommendations. The Parkinson's 25 things. We're giving you the first one for free. It's right there. And we have 25 specific recommendations to slow your rate of progression of the disease or to prevent the disease altogether. pdplan.org. pdplan.org.
For those of you listening in, Ray has now held up a promo card for his new book, about 23 times. So that was 24. But we're using only the audio, you see.
Well, we can put a link to the card on the podcast page so people can download that if they want. So we'll make sure they get that image so they can easily download that when they go to the podcast.
Can I tell you something about books? Yeah. So I read a lot. Books are a gift. You are getting the best of someone who's devoted, in general, years of their life to writing a story for you to read. Those stories are either to entertain, fiction, or something, or to educate. And so you got Michael Oken and Ray Dorsey going back and forth, criticizing each other for 2 to 3 years to come up with an idea, develop a plan. Some of you know in the United States that President Biden signed in the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act. So we said, well, they got the plan. The federal government for the first time now needs to come up with a plan. Well, why don't we move ahead a little faster and come up with our own plan? People can comment on, critique it. It can be improved. It's got shortcomings.
Yeah.
But you got two guys who spend a lot of their time thinking about Parkinson's disease. Michael spends a lot of time thinking about new treatments. I spend a lot of time thinking about preventing the disease. And we we've spoken to you, as Edgar and Eli alluded to. We hang out in the Parkinson's community, and we're giving you the best, I think, close to the best of us, for 2 to 3 years on working on it. So we have stories. We have people from Stein Nelson from Norway. We have Brian Grant. We have female Sarah Whittingham, Jana Reed, 2 women who graduated from the Air Force Academy, ran track, became physicians, served in Afghanistan, are mothers, and both developed Parkinson's at age 45 and were diagnosed within 1 month of one another. Mm-hmm. And we say why this happened. And we're giving you a gift. This is a gift we're giving to you. It's you have to buy the book, but you're going to increase awareness for the disease, a plan for you as individuals, a plan for you as communities, and a plan for all of us as societies to change the course of the disease. And we give you a goal. So we have 3 goals with the book. First is by 2035, in 10 years. So this will be, won't be a year for it will be a year for the World Parkinson's Congress. So 2035, that the global incidence of Parkinson's disease adjusted for age will be 0%.
Okay. So
that by 2035, there will be no rise adjusted for age in the incidence of Parkinson's disease.
So you're like, go big or go home. This is your plan.
So that's the first element. First goal is 0. Second goal is 10. So by 2035, we will increase research funding, as Michael J. Fox said in his Capitol Hill tennis testimony, 10-fold, and 10% more, 10 times as much will go to preventing the disease. So right now, the United States, the NIH spends about $250 million on Parkinson's disease per year, spends over $3 billion a year, more than 10 times as much on HIV, even though Parkinson's disease and HIV affect a similar number of Americans. And actually, the new cases of Parkinson's disease in the United States now exceeds that for HIV. Just think about what that investment in HIV has done. If we did that for Parkinson's disease, could we drop the incidence of Parkinson's disease?
Yeah.
And right now, only 2 cents of every research dollar goes to preventing the disease. Only 2 pennies out of every dollar goes to preventing the disease. By 2035, we want 2 dimes of every dollar to go to preventing the disease. So that's 10. And then Michael Oken said, Ray, we need to do something on the care front. And he says by 2035, we want to have 100% of people with Parkinson's disease have access to levodopa. And, 90% of individuals with HIV who are diagnosed with the condition have access to highly active antiretroviral therapy. These medications are expensive, they're complex, they're difficult to manage, they have some significant side effects. Fewer than that have access to levodopa, even though it's simple, it's cheap, it's safe, and it's highly effective. So if we can give access to HIV medications for 90% of people diagnosed with the disease, why can't we give 100% of people with levodopa access to people? So 0, 10, 100, 0% increase in the incidence of Parkinson's disease globally by 2035, 10% increase, 10 times increase in funding, and 10 times increase in the proportion of funding going to prevent the disease, and 100% of people having access to levodopa by 2035. The book details a plan to get us to that goals.
Hear, hear.
Hear, 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 hear. I think I don't think so. I can see clearly that we are at the end of this episode. There are only 2 exit questions left, Ray. The first one is that your ship has sunk and you are washed ashore on a deserted island. The only thing there besides that one single palm tree and yourself is an old-fashioned record player. It's solar powered, so that's sorted.
You have filtered water, obviously, on this island too, so you can survive for a little while.
And then you look at it and you say, if I could play only one record, what would it be? It's totally free in time, space, genre, whatever, rock and roll, soul, classic, fantastic, folk.
I think I'm partial to The Man in Black by Johnny Cash.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah. And so Johnny Cash said he would love to wear a suit with a rainbow of colors, but he wears a suit of black for those who live on the hungry, hopeless side of town. And so I don't wear black. I'm an optimistic guy. But we need to have people who make their voices heard for those who don't have voices. And the people with Parkinson's haven't found their voice. They're going to find it. The PD Avengers is going to help. But I like the man in black because we need to have people standing out in front for those who don't have voices or haven't yet found their voices. And I think that's a great thing for all of us who do have voices to make those voices heard on behalf of the communities that we should be serving.
That I can chime in on. That is so absolutely the way that I'm going as well, is to say, be a voice for those who do not have a voice. There are a number of people actually, as some may know, I also do a weekly podcast in Norwegian, and I contact people frequently, naturally, to invite them as guests, and then a number of them say, well, you know, I don't like to speak, and I'm not sure I should, etc., etc. Those of us who have a voice need to use it for those who do not. Absolutely.
Yes.
So we're on track there. The second,
and then and then we need to give love to people who give those voices. So Michael J. Fox for 30 years has given his voice for Parkinson's disease. Muhammad Ali gave his voice to Parkinson's disease. Brian Grant has given his voice to Parkinson's disease. Davis Finney has given his voice to Parkinson's disease. Eli Pollard has given her voice to Parkinson's disease. Edgar has given his voice to Parkinson's disease. We should really appreciate, honor, and respect these individuals who do so. It's really hard to bear the burden of Parkinson's disease. It's really hard to bear the burden of a disease and to be the face of it. And so we should really appreciate those who do. Larry Gifford, Sonia Mather, Tim Haig, and the PD Avengers.
Yeah, thank you. It's important. We stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, for sure.
We do. Absolutely. Last question here. You're in an elevator, Ray, stuck between two floors. Who do you want to be stuck with?
My wife and my kids.
We love that. We love that answer. You're only the second person who said that. The other one was Leonidas Stephanus. He was like, I just want my wife. That's it. That's great. We love that. Every answer is a good answer, and everyone's got really interesting responses to that question. I love that.
I mean, what a gift. And I think we're a little bit asleep on this, right? If you have Parkinson's disease, you know that your children are 2 to 4 times more likely to develop Parkinson's disease than people who aren't. Isn't it our responsibility to protect our children? I spent 10 years of my life working in the Huntington's disease community, a purely genetic disease. I don't think I said the environment once. So some people don't think I'm anti-genetic. Huntington's disease is 100% genetic. You carry the mutation, you're going to develop the disease. If you don't carry it, you're not. And there's this great guy, Jeff Carroll. He's a neuroscientist in Seattle. And he comes from a family affected by Huntington's disease. And he himself carries a genetic risk factor, the gene responsible for the disease. So he is going to develop Huntington's disease. But he did pre-implantation genetic diagnosis to select embryos that don't carry that mutation so that his children do not.
Amazing.
And so he has said, Huntington's disease is going to die in my family with me. Huntington's disease is going to die in my family with me. He doesn't have other cousins and the like passing it on. So in his family, Huntington's disease is going to die with him. It will not be passed on to his children. What a wonderful thing if we said, hey, I got Parkinson's disease, but by George, my grandchildren are not going to get it.
Would be great.
That would be incredible.
I say thank you very, very much, Ray Dorsey, for being with us today. Great contributions, great thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray.
Thanks to Eli Pollard for being my co-host again. Thank you, Eli.
Thank you for joining the Hear Here Parkinson's podcast. If you would like to experience the next World Parkinson Congress for yourself, to feel and see the change in real time, save the date to join us from May 24th to the 27th, 2026 in Phoenix, Arizona. Learn more at wpc2026.org. This podcast series is made possible with support from Blue Rock Therapeutics.